Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Cabinet meeting on today, 9th of September. I'm Tim Adams. I'm the Chair of Cabinet. And the first item on the agenda is for apologies for absence. I don't believe we have any apologies. So in respect of the minutes, were there any points or questions people had? No. Okay, then I will propose acceptance, seconded by Councillor Toy. And just all of those in favour, please, unanimous. Yeah, thank you. We have no public questions. Were there any declarations of interest in items on the agenda? Councillor Shines, go ahead.
Just in relation to item 8, I live in the west of North Walsham and I'm a town councillor for the west of North Walsham as well.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? No. I wouldn't have said so myself because, we might use toilets anywhere across the district or indeed, the county or country, really, I suppose, public provisions such as that. So we have no personal ties or business interest in them. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. So items of urgent business, there are none. Are there any member questions at this stage? No. Okay. So the first substantial item is recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Councillor Dixon, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, there are a number of recommendations arising from the meeting on the 17th of July, and for the benefit of the recording, I will go through them. So the first part of the first one was recommended that the council request the East of England Ambulance Trust to provide, and then there are two requests there. The first is the mapping of the community first responders in North Norfolk to establish where any gaps in the numbers of volunteers are. And the second is to communication materials for members of the council to use when talking to their respective town and parish councils about the co-responding and the role of community first responders. And the second part of the substantive recommendation there is for the council works with the Norfolk Ambulance Trust to help promote its campaign on community first responders and co-responding by signposting members of the public towards the Ambulance Trust's community first responders. So that's a web link there for it. And the second part of that is to encourage members of the council to talk to their respective town and parish councils on the importance of the work being done by community first responders, with the aim of increasing the understanding of those roles and seeking to achieve more volunteers to apply for those roles. So that was the first one arising out of that item. The second recommendation relates to North Walsham High Street Heritage Action Zone, and that is to update the Overview and Scrutiny Committee in 12 months' time on the impact of the North Walsham High Street Heritage Action Zone initiative, and learning from this to establish a set of evaluation criteria, including baselines that can be used for similar projects in other towns in North Norfolk. So those, Mr. Chairman, are the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Councillor Dixon. I'm happy to propose acceptance of the recommendations. Second by Councillor Toy. All of those in favour, please. Thank you. The 8th item is recommendations from the Planning Policy and Built Heritage Working Party. And I didn't realise, so we don't have Andrew. Oh, there he is. What am I talking about? You're right there in front of me. Go ahead.
Well, slight disadvantage, Mr. Chairman, because I wasn't present at that meeting. But suffice to say that I'm pleased that the Wells Neighbourhood Plan has now been made. I'm sure it will have an essential role to play in shaping our emerging local plan
Mhm.
as it moves forward. As regards to North Walsham West Development Brief, that has been modified in the inspector's comments. He has indicated that the industrial land around the Bradfield Road area is probably not a requirement for the plan, given its pressure or the pressure it would create perhaps on traffic movements in future years. But more than that, I don't think I ought to say at this stage, because the emerging local plan is at a fairly delicate stage between the council and the inspector.
No, that's absolutely fine. Just one thing, if we could request of officers, if we can publish a link to the North Walsham Development Brief alongside the minutes, presumably, you know, on the website section, obviously not wanting to see the entire brief published page by page in the minutes, but just so anyone can find that, if that's okay. Anything else anyone wants to say on either of those two recommendations at all? No? Go ahead, councillor Twine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just to say I was at that meeting and so I'm happy to propose.
Okay,
That's all. Thank you.
seconded. Okay, thank you. All in favour of accepting those recommendations, please? That's unanimous. Thank you ever so much. And I, just wanted to say as well, well done to those involved in Wells in the formation of the neighbourhood plan. Appreciate it's a huge amount of work and it takes an awful long time. So well done to them for that. Item 9 is delegated decisions from February to August. So that's to note 9 delegated decisions around a number of subjects: planning, environmental, coastal, and indeed the elections taken under delegated authority. So there's simply to note those. Okay. Item 10 is the corporate plan progress, which includes this time the final report for the 23-24 period and Q1 of 24 and 2025. First of all, to point out and correct a copy and paste error that has occurred late on in respect of point 38 on the progress report for 24 and 25. That's in respect of customer services, and this was corrected drafting, but unfortunately occurred subsequently. This sort of thing happens, just copy and pasting error. So what it should say in the narrative is that the customer service manager is reviewing our current provisions and continues to look at opportunity to deliver more efficient customer interactions both for the customer and council. A fuller review process is anticipated to be delivered across the summer months as part of the service reviews. So apologies for that. Rounding off 23-24 initially, of course, the target around second homes premium remains red due to the previous legislative delays. The conversations are, of course, progressing there, including, I believe it's next week. A number of actions were purposely delayed due to greater priorities and opportunities, mostly related to the work on the proposed Fakenham Leisure Centre swimming pool, namely the rural strategy, active environment strategy, etc. Other areas where we have been waiting on action that is out of our hands, for instance, with the waste strategy and bank hubs, and further one where we've had limited resources at this time to be able to progress further. But substantial completion with many actions, of course, spanning a longer period and therefore featured in certainly the following year, but possibly even beyond that, as they set the posture for the way we approach various things within the corporate plan period. Moving through to 24-25, and just to highlight a few of those action points. So, well, in respect of item 1, which is the local plan, and obviously councillors are familiar with the changes necessary to the local plan, and the working group are obviously already discussing that, so that's not unexpected. even in a good case scenario without, you know, the sort of increased pressures in housing demand, etc. And just trying to think what else I want to highlight. Item 5, I think that was another Amber, in respect of identifying more areas for rewilding essentially. So not an area without its challenge. Some of the areas we've done so far haven't all gone completely to plan, but this will be given appropriate prioritization in future. And there's obviously quite a lot varying estate across the district where such actions might be possible. Item 12 is in respect of the active environment strategy. That's, I believe, also an Amber. Familiar with the scheme, I hope everyone is, at the Lees in Sheringham, and meetings to occur this week. That was one that was delayed previously. The item 16 is in respect of the sports provisions, and that's perhaps not it's perhaps originally envisaged, you know, around North Walsham, but planning permission has now been gained in Cramer, and we know the position, or I suppose we don't know the position. You could say at Fakenham at this time, but obviously an awful lot of work is going into that. So I think that's enough from me on the individual points, and the action is to review and comment on the progress report. So is there any questions on individual items? I must stress I don't actually have an agenda in front of me, so if you have any, I will just rush to the laptop. No? Okay, at this time? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, thank you for officers for the production of that report. And we are now on item 11, which is budget monitoring. And I'll hand over to Councillor Shice. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is the monitoring for the previous 4 months. This is for the current year's budget. At the start of the budget setting process last year, my pledge for transparency and openness is set out in this report. As you can see, we are giving as much information as possible as to where we are and why we are where we are. The predicted deficit for the end of year is noted and written out on page 25, 26 to 2.6 to 2.9. You'll see the reasons for that. I'll look over to my colleague, Councillor Fredericks, who unfortunately has appeared in many of these budget monitoring reports and budget conversations due to the increased costs of meeting our need for providing temporary accommodation for homeless households across North Norfolk. The main point that I wanted to bring out here was in regards to the way that we are monitoring and detailing the savings that we set out to make in this budget, and the 250,000 savings to yet to be identified when we set the budget. My request for review and scrutiny when we began this process was that the savings and pledged increases in income would be closely monitored by them. So I hope that this, when it reaches scrutiny, will be to their liking in terms of the detail that's set out. The thing that I do want to say at this point is a huge thank you to officers who have risen to meet the challenges that we're facing as an authority in terms of making the savings and grappling with the current cost pressures that we've got, particularly to temporary accommodation. So I hope Councillor Fredericks can pass on my thanks to her team for the work that they're doing supporting our families. And then finally, with regards to the drop in interest rates that we will have seen, that will of course have an impact on ourselves in terms of income generated, and that is mentioned in point 4 of the report. This report will go to a review and scrutiny as well, but I welcome any questions. But I just want to hand over to Councillor Fredericks just to talk about the impact of homelessness on our district.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. Yes, the greatest financial challenge is our temporary accommodation bill. So as in every household budget, we have things that are essential that we have to buy to keep things going. There's things that we don't have to and we can cut back, but they make our lives better. So homing households that come through the door is not only our moral, but our statutory duty. It's our legal duty. There's no set budget for this. And as we've seen in recent years, due to a number of factors, private rental coming to an end and homes being sold, domestic abuse, overcrowding, all these factors have contributed to households becoming homeless. We've done a lot of work, the prevention team has done a lot of work trying to help people before they become homeless. Become homeless. But the reality is that they're just stemming a huge wave where we've not been able to provide or deliver social housing through our partners in recent years. The problem has gotten worse. So we have to shoulder that. And we do that willingly because nobody should be homeless in this district. And I want to be clear that this is North Norfolk residents that we're talking about. People that in our district have the most care, most need for homes. I'm not going to even bother feeding the right wing or far right wing rhetoric on this. It is our residents that find themselves in an impossible position with rents rising, rentals coming to an end and nowhere to go. So we're working hard not only to prevent, but we're also working extremely hard with our housing associations and developers to provide those homes for long time prosperity for them. So yes, this is something that we have to spend money on, and that money has to come from different areas of the council. And in the last 5 years, we've been trimming down budgets every single year. And this is where we have to take really, really hard decisions on those things that we're not legally obliged to fund. So thank you.
Councillor Frederick, was there anything more from you? Sorry. So, yeah, obviously, the housing costs there, the great bulk of our financial pressures, as much as £1,000 this year. I just wanted to also say welcome, the work the innovative work, in fact, that has been done by our own housing section, the social housing providers, in terms of actually reducing that figure in the last year, because the pressure is still very much there. It's just the way that it's being dealt with has reduced that. So that's very much welcome. This is obviously councils across the country. I mean, if you take that element out, you've still got, inflation and interest rates pressures that's amounted for another very much a large chunk of that pressure in the last year and the year before. Electricity costs and service contract costs, etc., have obviously been a big factor as well. But these are things that affect the whole sector and not something that we have caused. We obviously know where we are in terms of the housing pressures. So I did also want to highlight that we wanted to propose a different recommendation in respect of recommendation 4 around the car park capital budget. That was that we include an addition to the capital programme for the extension and enhancement of the car parking offer in the district at a location to be determined. So that's rather than talking about an individual location, because we feel we need to explore some other opportunities due to demand and supply, I suppose you could say. And almost certainly, that additional provision will be in that sort of north central coastal area where we've got the most demand. But we've got 1 or 2 other things we wanted to discuss. We didn't want to hold myself to the investment in that location. So is that okay? Is that understood? Do you want me to repeat a bit of wording there? Or is that okay? Yeah, absolutely fine. Thank you, Lord. Okay. Any other questions or Go ahead, Christopher. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the report. It's good news clearly that the savings that you have identified for the current year are on track to being achieved. But do note clearly we are forecasting about £1 million deficit for the end of the year. So I'd be interested to know what work is underway to identify further savings. I know obviously we've got an agenda item later on in the thing, which obviously covers a small part of that, but obviously I'm assuming that there is other work underway. And when might we hear what your thinking is along those lines? Thank you.
So obviously the entire staff team are working towards savings and income generation as they have been doing for the last 12 months. There are service reviews underway, and I'll hand over to Officer Stanley shortly just to update Cabinet on where we are with those. It's my aim that the further savings that are determined through our officers' hard work will be reported in further budget monitoring reports, so that we've all got a clear idea of what's happening and where we're heading and how that's being achieved. But I'll just hand over to Officer Stanley to update Cabinet and the other guests in the chamber as to where we are with the service reviews.
Morning, everybody. Yes, we're carrying out some service reviews. Some are underway, such as car park review, the provision of the contract. One of the agenda items on partial closure of toilets also is an agenda item on this meeting today. We are closely monitoring the budget position. We're taking every step that we can to try and reduce the level of deficit in year. We're looking at whether we keep in place positions that have been held vacant for quite a long time. We need to have a look at the structure of some of the teams, see whether we can take those posts out of the establishment. We're looking at contracts. We are looking at ways of increasing income. A lot of the pressure is down to non-controllable expenditure, such as the demand-led temporary accommodation, but we'll try and do what we can to mitigate that where possible. And managers are looking at every area that they can to try and identify savings, and the ADs are working closely with their managers to do this at the present time. We'll take any savings that we can find for 24-25 to reduce the deficit, and then look at where we can set a balanced budget by taking further savings for 25-26.
Obviously, it's a concerning position, but that's encouraging to know that you are looking at it. Just remind me, when will we see the next budgeting report? Because I think that will probably be the crucial one. Is that November?
Yeah, the end of September report will come to Cabinet in November.
Lovely. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, clearly since the general election, the White Knight hasn't come over the hill and saved local government, and we're at the point now where we've taken £1 million in savings over the last year, reductions in services, greater income from a number of things like garden bins, car parking, and repair, even planning applications, greater use of reserves, and now we're unfortunately holding quite a lot of vacancies, reductions in staffing potentially. So we're already very lean, so there's not a lot you'd go around and say, well, that could be reduced, that could be reduced. It doesn't really exist there. So there will be unfortunately some very difficult decisions in the next year around achieving that. Obviously, all eyes will be on the budget announcements 30th of October. But we're all obviously very cynical, I suppose you could say, about what that might deliver for us. Not just us, but obviously households and businesses and all sorts of other concerns. So it's certainly got to a point, hasn't it, in local government now, and we hope to see things improve for all concerned. So were there any other points or questions anyone wanted to make at this stage? If not, if we propose, councillor Shives propose the recommendations with the changes to recommendation 4 around the extension enhancement of car parking facilities. And I will second, can we vote all those in favour? Thank you, Alison. That's included. So item 12 is in respect of the public conveniences. Thank you, John. In respect to the public conveniences, and obviously we've sort of set the context really there with the previous discussion to a certain extent around our budgetary pressures and where they are from in respect of housing, inflation, interest, contract pressures, etc. And we now have, a number of considerations to make with our estate, and in this respect, the public conveniences. So I hope you don't mind me going on. Is that okay? We obviously, in a perfect world, wouldn't want to make all of these decisions, though I dare say in some of these cases, we would be making such decisions anyway, just because of the logical ownership of those provisions. In some cases, in fact, we don't own them, the freehold of those buildings, where we are sort of operating them for the benefits of businesses or other concerns, etc. Or where usage has dropped to a significantly low level. Obviously particularly over the winter periods, or where those communities of conurbations have sort of developed and left that provision behind, and it's no longer suiting the needs of that location. So obviously then, particularly talking about Potter Heigham and Stalham particularly. And then we've got the other exception, where of course there is some income derived from the car park, and this is Weybourne, where we have no service connection, there's no sewer connection, and it's badly abused by unfortunately a small number of people. It's supposed to be a composting facility that's often contaminated. It's overused, and it's actually, from also a point of staff welfare, it's really not a very good provision to be doing our best to maintain, but it has failed, I'm afraid. So the capital requirement to invest in a connected facility is just something that we would struggle to justify. So obviously, we've got the potential for closures there at Weybourne, Potter Heigham. Stalham is, I suppose, a bit different in that we do want to replace that facility in future. Decades ago, obviously, when we had the market in Stalham, that provision was ideally located. It's now off of the town centre, and we don't feel it meets the needs or contributes to the future emerging provision for the town. So ideally, we wanted something located, well, it's not far off the centre, but more visibly on the town centre, ideally around the car park in future. And these provisions are obviously costing us a great deal of money every year. It's around £800,000. But we've run some of these for a very long time. We continue to want to run toilets, and we continue to invest in public toilet provision. But we've got to recognise that, again, some of them we are maintaining in locations where we have no income stream to support them. Others, businesses or other organisations, hold those revenue streams. So, for instance, West Runton, Walsingham, Hickling, already a conversation ongoing in respect of the Hickling Stay toilet provision, and obviously the Norfolk Wildlife Trust have recently taken on the public sector. We don't own the provision; we've been handing it back, as it were, and it's a struggle to justify doing that now, where the ratepayer is subsidising that provision. And of course, you know, it's not to say they're not needed. So our hope is, of course, that those facilities don't close. And we can hand them over to another party. So it's fair to say this is the start. You know, we're after today, the toilets won't, you know, immediately close or anything like that. It's the start of a conversation, and that's a conversation we'll be having with various representatives with those communities, and we've invited that dialogue. The other aspect is obviously the winter closures, and that's mostly obviously in the coastal locations, and you've also got the locations in the Broads at London Bridge and Wemax Stay. The usage obviously drops down to a very much lower level over the winter period. And in some of those examples, obviously, Beach Road, Wells, West Prom, Stockholm Road and Cromer, and East Prom and Sheringham, you have other nearby, sometimes very closely related provisions that we are hoping will be sufficient to meet that wintertime demand. But of course, you know, we're always up for a discussion. So we're hoping to obviously realise, you know, around £100,000 of savings here if possible. There are contract considerations in respect of the Serco cleansing, and there are tipping points in respect of that. But as per the previous item in discussion, there are, you know, a great deal of pressures on the budget. But I hope I've also tried to demonstrate that, you know, in some of these cases, natural progression would have led to some of these facilities disappearing regardless of that. So I think that's enough for me to start the discussion. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, so thank you, Councillor Adams. The main message that I want to get across is that we are very much looking to work with partners in the community to see that these facilities remain open. This isn't us saying that we don't want people to be able to have access to a public toilet. This is us saying at the moment we have got bigger pressures, and as Councillor Fredericks outlined very well earlier, that pressure at the moment is to house our homeless families of North Norfolk. And, you know, I'm very sad and sorry that we're in the position where we have families who are without a home at the moment. That being said, this is my desire to be open and transparent, as I've pledged from the beginning, because this is a very, very early conversation. This is to put the conversation out into the public domain, really. So this will be going to overview and scrutiny. It will be come back to us for consideration. And I think we're looking at potentially a December decision. So this is not a decision for now. This is us saying, here's the conversation. This is where we need to be, work with us to get there. Overview and Scrutiny Committee are very aware that this was an item that would be coming up when we discussed savings options that we had considered. So I've done everything that I can possibly do to be completely open and transparent from the get-go on this item. I know that it's going to adversely affect certain areas across the district. But again, just to reiterate, we want to work with partners in the community to ensure that these facilities can remain open. So if there's anybody who would like to work with us, please come forward.
Yeah, and you know, just to reiterate, we expect you know, discussions with a number of different parties. We're partly expecting one with Toham, welcome one with Weybourne, and obviously, you know, discussions have been going on already in terms of Hickling Estates, and obviously we want to have a discussion with potential interested parties around Walsingham and West Rumson as well. So yeah, very much sort of starter really this time. So obviously welcome, you know, we've got some local members from some of those communities today. Is there anything you wanted to say? Go ahead, Matthew. Yeah, and then I'll come to you, Victoria.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, councillors. Just as a foreword, really, before I get into the meat of what I want to say, you know, both Kevin and myself completely appreciate the budgetary position of the council and, you know, the difficult decisions which have to be made. So when I talk today, we're not speaking in ignorance of all of that. We understand the pressures. But of course, nonetheless, we are disappointed to see this come forward after years of campaigning for more investment into Stalham. The proposal to take away an asset, and this really is the key point. It refers back to something you said earlier, Tim. We don't feel any proper progress has been made towards the replacement. And, if we were sitting here and it was a different circumstance and we'd had plans or, further conversations, more detailed conversations about that replacement toilet block, which does make Stalham different to the other closures being proposed, I think we'd be far more comfortable, far more happy with the decision being taken and moving forward. We are consistently told by the council, by officers, by members of the cabinet, that Stalham is asset poor in terms of the district council assets. I think off the top of my head, there's 4. Taking away one of them 4 to us and to the community does not send a very good message. I think the main source of our concern comes around the lack of consultation. And, it was good to hear that obviously this is going to be a process. You're going to go out, you're going to talk to the community, because it is, in our opinion, that, it will be the businesses that suffer. They are the ones that are going to have to take the burden from them toilets being shut. I mean, when we have our street events in Stalham, which I'm sure most of you have attended or seen, we have thousands and thousands of people come up our high street. The businesses are packed already. There needs to be a place for people to go and, relieve themselves in a public convenience. Something else we want to do, something else we want to look at, and of course we haven't had time to have these conversations yet, is potentially trying to bridge that gap. I mean, Stalham Town Council are meeting this evening. So we haven't had a chance to formally raise anything with them. But, potentially if there could be a situation where the town council bridges that gap, if they take over the running of the facility until we see the replacement come forward, I think that would be positive. I think that would keep this facility in the town. It would keep it open. And, for our very important street events, that would keep them going. So we want to see, to be honest, deferment until these proper consultations have come forward, until we've had these conversations, until business owners have been spoken to, until we've had time to speak with the town council and put that to it. And of course, we will have that conversation with them tonight when we're at that meeting. But in terms of a holistic view on this, I mean, we are disappointed, and it comes back to that. We would want to see far more progress made on the replacement. We would want to see plans. We would want to be very engaged in conversations before this decision is taken, because I don't want to be left as the only town in North Norfolk without a public convenience. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Appreciate your time. Kevin, is there anything you wanted to add? Just obviously sticking with the Stalham theme.
The time element, I'm just really reinforcing what Matthew said. It is asset stripping again, and quite clearly it's the actual businesses that will take up this, and they haven't been consulted. We've had one business who approached us who have recently had their toilets refurbished, and they are very concerned that people will be using them who will not be spending in their facility. So I think it's about consultation, and it's about the loss of a toilet within the town, within one of your towns in North Norfolk, is a bit alarming, really. But again, I do appreciate the budget. Matthew and I spoke about this, and really he's put it in a very succinct way. Thank you.
Thank you. Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I share the community's frustration. This is about Weybourne, of course, and anger about the closure of the toilets at Weybourne Beach. We completely accept the need to reduce the budget deficit and deliver essential services, but surely there are other less punitive ways to achieve this. Our understanding is the facilities will be removed before the end of September, but we would like an opportunity to discuss this beforehand with the council. And we're struggling to understand how we've arrived at this point. NNDC identified a need for 5 toilets, and we wonder if the right toilets were put in at the right time, and enough has been done about the camper van misuse causing all these issues. And hundreds of thousands of people are still walking along the coastal path. They won't go away. So what's going to happen about the effects of that when there's no loo between Sheringham and Clyde? That's an awful long distance, and directing people from Weybourne to a loo at Sheringham is a very long walk back if you've just walked from Sheringham and you're dying to go. So we would like an opportunity to discuss it with this with you. There must be a better solution. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Peter, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the discussion of course, about the Beach Road toilets at Wells. Wells doesn't see too much of a reduction in shortfall, Christmas time, winter, numbers of people coming. And also behind the toilets at Beach Road is the play area, children's play area. And obviously it would be a great disappointment if this had to close at any time, really, these facilities. However, of course, we have got Stairman's Yard relatively close. But my plead would be that if we do have to close these facilities for any time, that suitable signage is put up so that people know where these other toilets are. I can remember somebody asking me as they got off the train at Cromer where Cadogan Road was, because there was a sign that helpfully said the nearest toilets are Cadogan Road. No map, nothing. So I think that's the biggest thing. I'm also pleased that the Newgats Lane toilets are not in the discussion, and I hope they won't be. This is, of course, the bus hub with buses coming from Fakenham, Kings Lynn, and from the Cromer direction. So it's and it's very well used by people who have all got their bus cards and have free travel. And that's all I'd like to say, really. I'd really like to push the signage, and that's on any of these toilets, just not at Wells. Thank you.
No, thank you. Okay, well, we've just got just below 20 minutes, so just to go through this, I'll go through them in reverse if that's okay. So I do agree we will need to do something on signage. It's a factor, not just in Wells, but in other locations. We've got challenges with some of our outdated, dilapidated waymarking signage in various locations. Obviously, it's not all in our ownership as well. That's the other factor there. So that particular sign you mentioned in Cromer doesn't actually belong to the district council, or at least it probably isn't known to belong to us, because I think it's got a few years on the clock, that one. I think it's an urban district council sign. You know, I agree with you in terms of Newgate Lane. That provision seems to be increasing in usage. You know, it's very valuable for what's become a sort of bus hub, really, hasn't it? So, you know, in the long term, we still want to obviously see investments in some of these facilities to make them, you know, appropriate for the footfall, and that would certainly be a location that's been on my radar before. Beside Holverton, you know, there are locations where we can probably make more of that estate, but you know, the real constraint now is obviously the money to do so. So after the whole provision, you know, we're going to struggle in the medium term to carry out any further program of improvements. That's not to say there might be some, you know, national funding or something along those lines, which we do our best to secure if it popped up, but you know, that's not the reality at the moment. And I suppose that relates to Stalham as well. But yeah, we are constrained there, obviously, in terms of the land ownership. You know, really welcome the work that has been being done in Stalham around, you know, building a vision for the future. And I hope there's a placemaking project there in the future, because it's something we'd really like to realise at some point. And you know, do see public toilets as being part of the future provision. So before I cover your second point, Matthew, you know, obviously in respect of Weybourne as well, you know, the factor there has been particularly the abuse the facility has had. It's pretty oppressive, to be honest, what staff have to go through to keep that going. Large amounts of money to build a service connection. Obviously, we know it'd always be vulnerable to coastal flooding as well moving forward. But yeah, the capital project the cost of it would be heavily outweighed by the income we currently receive on the car park. That said, you know, in both the Stalham and the Waybourne cases, you know, we would welcome that discussion with the parish town council, etc. So obviously we've sent a letter to those bodies and some businesses, some other examples of landowners, etc. In the lead up to this. Apologies, it has been all quite quick. And you know, in that it says, you know, we welcome that further discussion and meeting. I appreciate most of those parish councils won't have met just yet. So that said, we've already had some correspondence and some acknowledgement, etc. We're not carrying out a specific public consultation. I should say that that's not something we've committed to, but really this is the start of a conversation. And as we said, and as Councillor Shire said, we're hoping not to close, you know, some of these provisions at all, and hopefully they can be handed over. So okay, we've got just above 10 minutes, and I saw an indication from Nigel Dixon. So if we can, we're going to have to take the recommendation soon, then. So go ahead.
I will be succinct.
Yeah.
Appreciate the budget situation and also welcome your indications. This is an early point in the conversation that needs to take place. So I ought to acknowledge that wearing my county council hat, I would endorse the comments made by the two Stalham district councillors. And in particular, I think the promise of investment in the future is encouraging, but I do think we need to see something far more substantial coming forward before one can add any sort of credence to that about what will be available in the future to replace that. But more generally, when I look at the options, and in particular option 3, the transfer to of all sites to town and parish councils, clearly there's quite a bit of work to be done there in that regard. Whether some of that work's been done or not already is not clear here, but I do think there is scope there to have some meaningful conversations so that those decisions are not wholly, but in part being taken by those people at the grassroots. Because there are several on the list there that I know about, but in particular, you know, the Ludham Bridge and the Womack Staithe toilets, they are in very strategic type positions, and they may not have a high utilization, but they are valuable facilities to have in those fairly remote Broads locations. So
yeah.
I would like to see time invested, effort invested in option 3 to see where that might go in terms of its viability.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
So
Chairman.
yeah, obviously, you know, we recognise as well their value. You know, we've previously invested in Womack Staithe, etc. Just an example of that. But obviously, the facility usage does drop off a cliff really in the winter period when the economy is quieter. I should say, you know, we'll probably play the card a bit really here, because we're not talking about, we haven't as a cabinet spoken during the debate around transferring or closing, or that's not really where, you know, we're obviously, you know, minded to do. We've got a you know, a mixed bag of options here to explore in respect of the facilities and the winter closures. Sure, to stress, you know, we can't ever promise the investment at Stalham. I think, you know, no one will be able to do that, because we're talking about in the years ahead, etc. But it is something we will endeavour to do, is try and realise a proper placemaking project for the town in future, subject to that funding being available, and of course, you know, a vision being set out as well. And that's the other crucial part with Stalham in the longer term. But certainly very much sympathise with everything all of the local members have said, and you know, really welcome you obviously taking the time to be with us to make this point. Obviously, there'll be other points in the discussion, and you'll probably be involved with the discussions if and when they emerge with individual bodies as well. So and I should also say, I did have a conversation with local member around Walsingham as well. And I just wanted to, I suppose, dwell on that facility a little bit because I appreciate they couldn't be here. So, you know, they would obviously have made the point, what had they been able to around, you know, the pilgrimage numbers, etc. And it is a facility that sees, you know, great deal of usage in those windows. You've got various pilgrimages that occur, and you know, a lovely village Walsingham is. But we no longer do, or never, you know, had in some of these instances an income stream to support the provision, and that's why we've moved ahead. So I just reminded myself that I hadn't spent a bit of time talking about that facility. Go ahead, Councillor Frederick.
Just quickly for those that aren't in the chamber, just to explain how finances work or don't work. So you might be saying, oh goodness, you've raised council tax. Why are you thinking of closing facilities? But actually, we only retain 8% of your council tax, so that we do everything that we can to do to provide you with support and service over that time and over that money. The rest of that goes to county council, parish councils, and the police as well. So any rises, we have to cost rising. We have to find in different departments, different areas, and toilets aren't actually a statutory service. There's some councils that have closed all their toilets across the country. They've closed their leisure facilities. So this is very much the start of a conversation of how we might meet that budget deficit, and also that the government will only give us a year's money. So they give us a grant for a year, but they won't give us that until we've actually set our budgets. So we have to set our budgets first, not knowing how much the government are going to give us. So I just thought I'd give that in context for anybody that's listening at home.
And the other related point to that is, of course, you know, we raised the council tax, say to the maximum threshold. You know, we're only looking at about, well, I'm not sure, it obviously will vary based on what the collection possibilities are at the time, but I think it's up to about 215,000, isn't it? Something like that. So, you know, that would be additional revenue, and obviously the gap we've got to close potentially next year, notwithstanding any potential government grants, and known is believed to be 1.8 million. So it shows you the, you know, that's a gulf really that exists. And as you know, some of you have rightly pointed out, this is just one part of that, but achieving, you know, potentially around £100,000 worth of savings, that's going to be an important part of that picture. Recognizing, you know, as we do, that these provisions are very important, and not to try and labour the point again, but in some cases we're not the right or appropriate body to be maintaining them, and in others the usage have dropped off, or the facility is otherwise wrong. So we've obviously we're going to need to close up, I'm afraid. We've got a few minutes and we're going to have to crack on with the next meeting. Can you keep it very brief? Yeah.
You know me, Tim. I
Yeah.
never waste words. Can I just then, for the avoidance of doubt,
Sure.
we're superseding the letter that said they're going to be shut at the end of September, the Waybourne Loos, but we're actually going to pause on that and have a consultation with the parish council?
I don't
Yes or no?
I
Thank
don't
you.
know if necessarily we will pause on the timeline, but we'll certainly have a discussion with Waybourne as soon as we possibly can. So we'll discuss that offline if that's all right. And certainly try and have that discussion. There is an awful lot going on at the moment with devolution discussions, and you know, obviously the second homes discussion, all sorts of things that are really biting into the time alongside the budget consideration. But we will certainly make time for a meeting with those bodies if it is indeed requested. Okay, so can you propose the relevant recommendation, because I don't have the wording in front of me for that?
Yeah, of course. So I just wanted to tweak it slightly.
Yeah.
Just to make it absolutely clear. So the recommendation that we have here is option 1, which is the full and winter closures progressed by officers. And a second review to look at further closures in 25-26 as part of the 25-26 budget setting process. I just want to make sure, so in option 3, where we've got transfer all sites, it's not that we're looking to transfer, well, that would always be a possibility, but in the recommendation under option 1, that we are looking to work with town and parish councils and other interested partners. I just want to make that incredibly clear. It isn't very clear in the
Sure.
option that's given.
Okay, so you're proposing which recommendation, sorry? Just leave one to-
So it's option 1 with a sprinkling of option 3 as opposed to a closure.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I saw the hand. Go ahead.
I think you probably have covered my point. I really wanted to see option 3 sitting alongside option 1 in the first recommendation.
If you want to.
So, thank you, Chair. So, yeah, the clarity around the recommendation is important. The paper has been presented to this cabinet meeting and essentially, I believe the position of cabinet to be that option 3 and 4 aren't being pursued. So there isn't a proposal to transfer all of the portfolio of public toilets to partners. But I think if there are town and parish councils that would want or be prepared to have a conversation with us from that long list of 37 facilities that aren't otherwise identified in option 1 for permanent closure or transfer or the seasonal closure, the council would be very open to having such conversations. But I don't think it's the position of cabinet under option 3 or 4. So do nothing's not an option.
Yeah.
And wholesale transfer or us withdrawing from the provision of the service is not proposed either. Hence the recommendation to focus on option 1 in terms of the facilities which either are the least well used, the most aged in terms of cost and management and maintenance, or those where there are opportunities to transfer to a partner provider because of particular context, and those contexts can be explained more fully because there is a justification for those, and it would be envisaged that they could be explored either with those partner parish councils, the transfer partner that have very briefly summarised in the report, or can be explored further through discussion by a review and scrutiny committee. And just to conclude, as the chair has said, this is the first paper of a number that we envisage coming forward over the next 3 months to December, where potential savings could be explored through the council in seeking to balance the budget for 25-26, obviously a process which concludes in February's full council. So this is just one element of work which officers are undertaking with the cabinet at the present time to identify potential savings, efficiencies or income generation. But that process has started early, but I don't anticipate that it's going to be easy, and it will involve some difficult choices and decisions in the months ahead.
We've got to wind up now, I'm afraid.
It's occurred to me that some of these toilets fall within the Broads Authority area. I am chair of the Broads Authority, and as such, am I allowed to vote on this issue?
If you feel that you would rather not in respect of some of those considerations in future, then feel free to abstain. That's not a problem for me.
I will abstain.
So okay, we've taken this discussion as far as we can. We see where we are in terms of these provisions. Yes, we're always open to a discussion around our estate more generally. To be honest with you, it goes beyond public toilets, but there's always a good deal to be had somewhere and a good arrangement that benefits the community, a new business, etc. So we're always up for a discussion. But I second the recommendations that have been made by positions. And I can vote all those in favour, please. Yeah, that's unanimous by the 1 abstention. Thank you. Okay, well, that concludes the business of the agenda.